On today's episode of Capstone's Talent Talk podcast, we are delighted to welcome Franziska Marshall, who is Senior Project Manager of Data Centres at Buro 4, based in the UK. Franzi's journey is compelling, from a strong real estate and construction foundation to plunging into the fast-moving world of mission critical and data centres. She's not simply managing projects, she's driving them with human-centred mindset, aligning engineering rigour and sustainability goals. In addition to all of this, Franzi is a valuable member of our Capstone Mentored community as both a mentor and a mentee, and helping us support and mentor the next generation of talent in our industry. Franzi, welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Good.
Good.
How are you doing?
Yeah, we are great, thanks, and we're
Well,
really
thank
looking
you, yeah.
forward to this. We're really looking forward to this. So why don't you start? One of the things I love about you is the non-conventional route that you've come into the industry. And when I've spoken to you in the past, it's really struck me how much determination and guts it's taken to do that. So can you give us a rundown of how you've ended up as senior PM at Buro 4 and all the journey in between?
I do ask myself that question quite a lot, actually, so it's probably a good one to kick off. I think I have to go quite a long way back for that, because that is all part of the journey, ending up in the construction industry in the first place, and then later in the data center industry. I grew up in Germany, did all my, let's say, pre-university education there, and did an apprenticeship actually in a completely different industry. And when I finished that apprenticeship, I just didn't quite feel like that was the end of my education, and started a degree apprenticeship in the UK. So that's what, got me on the island in the first place, which was with Turner & Townsend at the time as a project manager. And that's how I kicked off my career in the construction industry. Before that, it was a mix of aerospace. Whilst I was doing my A levels, I was working in a bakery. So if you want to put that onto the CV, some of those skills may have come in handy, but others haven't so much.
The pretzels.
The pretzels, yeah, they're always appreciated in the office, so definitely one of them.
Absolutely. So what made you, did you always want to come to the UK? So what made you choose the UK, and what made you choose construction? How did you get that apprenticeship? Because a lot of people listening, are looking to get into the industry. So how did you get the apprenticeship at Turner & Townsend, and why did you want to come to the UK?
I've always liked the UK. I've spent some of my school holidays over here living with host families. I love the language, the culture, people. Working in the UK is quite different to Germany. I obviously only found that out later, but for my personal preference, I quite like the work culture in the UK, as with everything, both of positives and maybe things that you don't enjoy quite as much. So I've always had that idea of ultimately studying in the UK, and then I stayed after I completed my degree. How did I end up in the construction industry? At the time, there weren't that many choices for degree apprenticeships, to be honest with you. I think what's really good is that that's changed. There's a lot more opportunities now. When I was looking at the time, there was probably about 10 that piqued my interest. And to be honest with you, that was a bit of roulette that happened there. Never heard of Turner & Townsend before, and just thought it would be a good opportunity. In my head, I saw that there was going to be, that was the one apprenticeship that gave me the most opportunity to develop and to grow and build a career around that. And that decision has turned out to be correct. So it was pure luck, really, ending up in the construction industry.
Right. And so sorry, Ollie, you go.
Sorry. No, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we sort of find that there are these moments in everyone's career where you've got a path and you decide to, fork in the road, whatever it is, you decide to take that certain path. And so with the people that you were speaking to and thinking, well, look, this is kind of what I'm thinking of doing, and there's Turner and Townsend, and did you speak to anyone there, or how did that kind of, did you get any advice or kind of guidance on things like that to kind of actually commit to that decision?
Yeah, I remember distinctively there was another program I was looking at that was sort of my favorite at the time, and that was really, really hoping to get, and I didn't get it. So the opportunity in Turner and Townsend came around a bit later, and I remember I was really disappointed. And I think we've all been there. We can all relate to that moment where we've got this vision in our head, and we want one thing to happen. And in this case, you get a rejection, and you think, all your plans are destroyed, and never going to find anything you like. And as it's turned out, a lot of the time, one door closes and another one opens, and that's exactly what it was. How did I make that decision? Mostly by talking it through with family and friends at the time. I was quite junior, so the whole idea of what does a project manager do was, completely. I had no idea really what to expect, if I'm being quite honest. And still to this day, I'm sure my parents won't mind me saying that, but I grew up on a farm, so very, you see what you've achieved by the end of the year. So it's quite an abstract role actually, for people that aren't in the industry. So especially for someone who's looking to start their career, I think it's really important to explain things to someone who doesn't necessarily who hasn't necessarily had that exposure to the world of work as we all know it, really.
Yeah, it's not always. I think historically, when you're looking at real estate and construction, certainly in the UK, there was a lot of nepotism. It's my father was a surveyor and my grandfather was a surveyor, and so I'm going to be a surveyor. It was like an obvious path. And what we're super passionate about is, opening up the industry, as well as many other advocates, by the way, is opening up the industry and lifting the bonnet on actually how do people get into the industry where it's not an obvious route, and part of that's making it visible, and the other part is talking about it like this. So how was your experience at Turner and Townsend? I mean, what a great business to start your career in. How did the mentoring work? How did the projects work? What were the challenges?
The first project that I worked on at Turner and Townsend was Chelsea Barracks,
Oh
which
my goodness me. Wow.
was
Cool.
huge, obviously, in many different ways. The project itself was quite huge as well, but the experience, I think, retrospectively more so at the time, I didn't really appreciate it. The one thing I noticed was, because that's when I moved to London, when I mentioned to anyone in the construction industry, people knew the project, and I just assumed that was, normal, and turned out to be, the flagship project for high-end residential development at the time. And I think obviously it's still ongoing, is iconic really. And Chelsea Barracks, Turner and Townsend, the people that I worked with, and one person in particular, I won't mention his name because I think I'm going to embarrass him if I do, but they've sort of stayed sometimes more in the background, sometimes, as line managers, as well as a line manager. I've been quite, have been super important to me in my career, from a mentoring perspective, but also I think people have seen potential in me before I recognized my own strengths and value. And that was probably one of the most important things for getting me to where I'm now. You need, especially early on in your career, you need people that recognize potential and push you, but also push for you. So I've been very, very lucky to have that really throughout my career. But particularly with my, again, now line manager, or my manager here, one of my managers in Buro 4, who I've had the pleasure of working with for a really long time. Again, sometimes more in the background and sometimes more present, but yeah, that's definitely a key element of success in terms of my career journey.
Isn't that great? You kind of make that decision to kind of move into Turner and Townsend, and you're fortunate enough to be working on a great project. But then also you have, people that come into your working life that actually really kind of help drive things forward, with you and for you, I guess, in some respects, with advice
Massively.
and all of that. That's kind of mentoring and so on.
Yeah, and I think you learn a lot from those people as well in terms of how you um not just how you work with people and how you maintain talent ultimately, but also that sometimes you just need to let people go, right? And trust the process. We shouldn't just build people up to a certain level, and then sometimes people have to find their own way, and that's what I did. After Tyler and Townsend, I went to Pure Data Centers, which again was fantastic opportunity for me, or loads of fantastic opportunities, moving from the pre-construction team into sustainability, which sat under the technology hat. And again, there was fantastic people in there that taught me not just technically so much, but also helped me to grow my confidence massively in terms of just believing that, it doesn't really matter what the challenge is. And if you look at something and you really have no idea where to start, which happens more often than you think, you figure it out, and that comes down to confidence ultimately. And I think that's really something that I've learned over the last few years, to believe in myself. And if you have people that believe in you before you get to the point where you can do that yourself, that's helpful, and just gives you a bit of time to grow and gain that confidence.
That's great, because you need that confidence in order to move from, and by the way, what a project to start on. If coming over to a new country, a new career, and you're thrown into Chelsea Barracks, I mean, that's unbelievable. But how did, presumably, that helped underpin your confidence of going into a brand new, extremely fast moving, completely different industry that is data centers? How did you find new mentors within Pure, and what sort of things were you working on? How did you tackle all of that? Because that's super interesting as well.
And to be honest with you, I didn't know much about data centers at all when I joined Pure. And I joined Pure in, I think September 2022. Don't quote me on that date, maybe. So a few years ago.
That's exactly
And
when you started, yeah.
Good. So I know my own CV. That's positive. And Pure was really Pure has grown massively over the last few years, and was really quite small when I joined at the time. Is obviously still, in comparison to other data center developers. You have that central team in London. People know each other, which helps massively, obviously, when you deliver projects. But when I came into Pure, I didn't know much, but I had the luxury about data centers, but I did know some things, but not about data centers necessarily. But I had the luxury of having real industry experts at hand, physical, in the office. I would have people on ICT security sitting next to me. I would have the chief technology officer on the other hand. And same with all the other disciplines, and the amount of knowledge that I've picked up just by being in close proximity to these people with that what seems as endless knowledge, really, to be honest with you, was valuable. Now I've grown to really I don't love sounds a bit sounds a bit funny, but I do love working in the data center industry. I love it. I think it's great. It's very different to your commercial development, what I did beforehand. But I think at Pure I discovered that actually I'm really, really good at that finding the sweet spot between ultimately what's construction operations, which is so different to residential and commercial development, obviously also consideration, but far more important in the data center industry. I did have a mentor at Pure DC, which was helpful, but I actually didn't really. I had unofficial mentors throughout my career, but the first official mentor I've ever had has been for you guys. So
Oh, really?
yeah.
And how's that been?
Amazing. I have to laugh because when I Barbara, my mentor, it was probably about 4 weeks before I joined Bureau 4. So I'd already made the decision to move on, and it was the first time we met. So it was just a bit of a general conversation and what got her into mentoring. And she said at the time, any career move she's made, she tried to look at I think it was 4 or 5 criteria that she'd selected, and she tried to never change more than 2. I think it was
Yeah.
level of seniority. Obviously, if you move to a different company, a different business, if it's a slightly different discipline, different geographic locations. I think that was the 4 criteria that she identified for herself. And she said, don't change more than 2 because it's quite a lot. And as she said that, I was thinking, different company, back from sustainability into construction and working in Germany. So I was like, did I just make a massive mistake?
Did I listen to what she said? But still data centers. Still data centers.
Still data
Yeah, you've kept that
centers.
same. Yeah.
So I kind of hang on to that. It's turned out to be a very good decision. I'm really enjoy what I'm doing here, and it really allows me to do what I'd like to do at this stage in my career. But yeah, it was funny, but I think that was great advice. I can't take the credit for it, unfortunately, but I think for any move you make, you do wanna there's a certain level of confidence and assurance that you get from knowing the things that you know, whether that's the company you know, whether that's the discipline and whether you've worked in this country before. I think if you do change too many things, it can be a bit overwhelming and just a little bit more stressful to figure things out.
Adds
and not
the pressure, doesn't it? If you
100%.
if you go in it, you want to be able to add some value pretty quickly whilst you absorb the new stuff.
Exactly.
And when you made that move to Pure, because we talk a lot about trying to bring transferable skills and experience into the data center sector because of we need to try and bring more people in to kind of deliver on everything. I suppose from a more of a technical perspective, how did you find that transition? I know you were surrounded by lots of good people around you, but your experience at Turner and Townsend and then making that move to Pure, more from a sort of technical perspective, how did you find that transition?
I think obviously there was a lot to learn. The data center industry is very there's a lot of abbreviations that you need to get your head around. So there was a cheat sheet that came in very handy. I found it quite interesting. I really like learning about new things, especially if I deem those things to be useful for my job. I think that's the key thing. If I feel like that I need to know about something because it allows me to do my job better, then I tend to absorb that knowledge quite quickly. I think for someone who's moving from a different sector into data centers, there's certain things that are useful to know. I think there's a general knowledge of data centers that you need and a bit of a general understanding. I do think it can be a little bit difficult to acquire that sometimes. Again, I have the luxury of with my role in sustainability that I did, of working for someone, my line manager at the time, who'd been in a data center space for a really long time and knew everything there is really to know.
Amazing.
In my
That's
view
great.
about just even the link back from the link back to operations, how you can how you implement in our case sustainability into operations, and in data center terms that means efficiencies. Everything is driven by energy, and that really allowed me to understand quite a lot that I probably wouldn't have had the chance to learn if I had stayed in the construction team, or I would have acquired that knowledge much later. And that is something that comes in really handy now on one of the projects that I'm working on. At the same time, I would say no one knows everything, and I think you do pick up a lot of things as you go along. There's a couple of training sessions that Microsoft have actually released on what are data centers, how do they work. I don't know if I'm
I was looking.
if
I
I can
was
say
looking
this.
at. Yeah, I was looking at those on with the Data Center Academy. I was looking at those this week myself, actually. Yeah, it's really brilliant resources.
Really, there's some really good stuff that's out there that everyone can access, really. But at the same time, don't stress. You'll figure it out. Don't feel like you need to know everything there is to know about your QE and WE and all the things that fly around. So that's the other piece of advice.
It's interesting as well. You mentioned kind of curiosity there as well, and that kind of wanting to find out more and learning and it seems like a big part of it as well for those people that are transitioning into the space is actually just because things are evolving so quickly.
Mhm.
You kind of it's really helpful if you do have that kind of open mind, you are curious, you kind of want to find out more, because there's just all of these problems that are constantly you're being challenged with, which I guess you would be on any kind of construction project and so on. But within DC, it's even more kind of pronounced just because of the evolution that's going on. So it seems like those sorts of things are also pretty valuable as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference between which project you're working on in the data center industry.
That's true.
And I'm a project manager, right? I don't need to know all the details in terms of technical design. You need to have an understanding. You need to have an overview. But obviously, there's different pressures on specific disciplines with emerging technologies, and how that gets translated into design from a technical perspective. But it's our duty as project managers to keep an eye on those things and say, hey, I've seen this. Why are we not doing that in a different way to how we thought we were going to do it? So and that's what I'm interested in, to ultimately take those challenges and pass them on to someone else to figure out.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But it's really important for us to keep an eye on the bigger picture of legislations. I'm sure people have mentioned that in the podcast, especially in Europe on the European Energy Efficiency Directive. Again, I'm working on a project in Germany at the minute, and that where you have to deliver a job in line with legislation, which is quite exciting for a project manager. Bit of a nightmare for a data center operator,
Yes.
but it's for me it's great because you can really educate, and that is a very operational focused legislation that you need to understand in order to deliver your construction project. So that's where things get really interesting for me, and that's really my
You're enjoying that. And so tell us what you are, tell us what you're working on to a degree at the moment in terms of, the locations. How is it working back in Germany, and, how's all of that been?
Well, I've never worked in the construction industry in Germany, so it's a bit of a first. And it turns out that my German data center construction vocabulary is a bit rusty. Um,
Really?
it is actually, it's quite scary how much, because it's a lot of technical knowledge that I've just never learned in German. So
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
on Copilot a lot, asking how you describe certain things in German, which is weird because I remember the times when I did that,
The
just the other way
reverse.
around.
That's incredible.
And we're very lucky because we've got a local partner that we're working with out in Frankfurt, whose construction vocabulary in German is excellent, so I can lean back on. But yeah, working in Germany is exciting. It's very international. So particularly in data center hubs around Germany, you do get a lot of teams from across Europe that really stay there for the project and then move on, which is quite intense actually, and quite unique, I think, as well in the construction industry. But working in Germany is fun because I feel like I'm discovering my German work personality again. It's almost as if I've developed everything that I am at work in the UK. And all of a sudden you use a different language, and it impacts a little bit the way that you operate. So I think it's just language is part of your identity, and if you switch it, it impacts me quite a bit. I didn't really expect that, but I'm getting my head around it. I've got a really good client who I've got a great relationship with. So very lucky in that aspect. Work quite closely with an operations team out there, who are a mix of German and English speakers, so I can do a bit of cultural translation there as well, which is always fun. So that's one project. It's an existing data center I've just mentioned, operations, which is where that sustainability and operational knowledge that I've gained at Pure comes in very valuable, or is very valuable. And then I've got the perfect balance to that, which is a new build data center project in the UK. As I think with everyone, unfortunately, I can't say too much on that, but it's a really exciting project. So the complete opposite in terms of what we're obviously not the complete opposite in terms of what we're looking to achieve, but I've got a operational project that is undergoing works and haven't even started on site, very early days. So it's a good contrast in terms of projects that I'm working on.
That's great to have that balance, isn't it? Just have those two, and equally across different locations as well. So you kind of, I'm sure there'll be the bits that you can kind of feed into both, if you see what I mean, from knowledge and experience of what you're working on in, say, Germany, that maybe even from a legislatory point of view as well. I don't know, but there could even be things that kind of come across in terms of best practice.
Yeah, and I think what when Sarah was asking before, when people transition from a different sector into the data center industry, particularly in the UK, getting planning works is this process that you learn on a project, and obviously it's different with each client, with each project. So sometimes I think moving in a different sector isn't quite as scary as you may think. It depends on the stage of the project, but especially early planning upfront, your civil works. Obviously, things are very specific to data centers, but there's a lot of knowledge that you can transfer. The fit out replacements during operations are more specific, and that knowledge comes in handy. But especially for new build projects, there's a lot of knowledge that you can transfer purely from a construction perspective. Some people may disagree. That's my personal opinion.
But I think that if you are, dealing with the fit out or retrofit or refurb, whatever you're doing, and in an operational data center, that's got to be valuable when you're getting involved in the pre-con stage and of a new build, because what works, what doesn't work. But also I think in the context of the rate with which things are changing at the moment, and the length of the regulatory stage, in the UK, that can, I don't know, a 5-year project, that could be 3 years. So, what you're going to need in 5 years is constantly changing anyway. But I suppose that poses challenges as well as, you know, excitement
Opportunities,
and opportunity.
It's definitely, I mean, it's you've just summarized it perfectly, Sarah. I think there's a lot changing in terms of legislation. There's a lot and regulations. There's a lot that has emerged over the last few years, and it's quite difficult to get your head around it, and more importantly, remain up to date, especially for data center operators. There's really there's a lot of nuance to compliance. And I think there will continue to be a lot of nuance, and especially again, a lot of it is driven by sustainability, which is good, but also some of the targets are set with a political agenda, and sometimes not as easy to incorporate. Again, things like PUE targets, power usage effectiveness, is a good KPI, but it doesn't necessarily tell you that your data center is very sustainable. It's effectiveness, not efficiency. And I think this shout out to Matt from the I'm going to get this wrong, from the Swiss Data Center Efficiency Association, I think it is, who've done quite a lot of work over the last few years to educate people on, including myself, what PUE really means, downforce. They've got some great, again, tools that are available for everyone. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance to that. And there's also going to be, probably, we've seen changes over the last year or so from a political agenda when it comes to climate financing and investment, and that has been the driving factor. If there's more investment into climate positive, that's not the right terminology, scrap that, but in projects that pursue sustainability, let's say, that will ultimately drive legislation and the translation into how we build and operate. But there's always two sides to the coin. So yeah, it can be quite challenging for operators.
But it's quite creative as well, it seems, in terms of the solutions that people are trying to find from a sustainability perspective as well. I think, particularly in the DC space, there's lots of stories here and there that people are working on of these initiatives that, I mean, are really impressive, and they're gonna, if they start to filter down through to other buildings and in the in the construction sector, I think that's gonna be really interesting. But it's just interesting, like the evolution of the space of the tech side of data centers, but then actually on the other side of that, you've got the sustainability piece.
There's so many different aspects that you can look at. There's the how do you construct the material selection, the design elements moving into the technology space, efficiencies in the design, then how you operate your data center based on the IT load that you have. So there's really there's not one thing that you do. Well, there's obviously one thing that you can do, and one thing is better than none. But it's really hard to really incorporate everything. It's quite a big challenge. So I think the design teams out there have got quite a lot of work to do on that, or are doing on that, sorry, and a lot of good work in terms of incorporating those requirements. So it's definitely the more difficult job.
Yeah, it's keeping up with the pace as well, and and the extent, the demand on all of that, which is just constantly increasing, isn't it? We were talking to Isabel Kemlin earlier on this week on a podcast, who's vice president of the Swedish and the European Data Center Associations, as well as an innovation lead for the Swedish Research Institute into sustainability and all sorts, and they've got some really, really interesting projects going on, and they're working across industries, across the entire kind of ecosystem. So that was super interesting to hear about what they're doing. So there's lots going on. So if we look at for somebody listening who's in the early stages of their careers, career. So for somebody who's in the early stage of their career or looking to move into data centers, and I know that you're saying that you love it, Ollie and I do as well. We, obviously, we come from a traditional kind of real estate and construction background as well, and covering lots of different asset classes. But we've got a particular soft spot for the data center piece, and Ollie obviously heads up that side of our business. But from your perspective, what is it that is exciting, or that keeps you in that sector, that that other people can learn from, and lift the bonnet on, as it were?
I've been really lucky with the people that I've worked with. I do feel like I don't want to put a negative picture on any other sectors, because there's great people everywhere. But for me, it's really been the people that I've worked with. I've been really, impressed with the data center industry. And I think if you look at events that are happening, there's a lot happening around inclusion as well, which I think doesn't, if you're junior in your career, you need to feel included. There's the whole background thing and the gender element as well, and I think that's, especially in the UK, again comparing it to Germany, UK is way ahead of Germany in that aspect. But I think when you're starting out, you want to feel included, right? You don't want to feel like the junior person that's just started and everyone else knows more. And you will feel like that. I think we've all felt like that. But I think the data center industry is really extremely good with all these forums that are there. There's something there for everyone, really, which is really inspiring. I think a lot of inspiring people in the industry, and I think the data center industry has attracted a lot of talent over the last few years, because these are quite complex, fast-moving projects. So a lot of people that used to work in different sectors have transferred into the data center industry. Again, there's also a lot of talent elsewhere, but I think what that means is that you do, in an industry that is growing rapidly and has already grown rapidly, but you do get to work with really, really clever people who are real leaders in their field. So I think that's what inspires me from a people perspective. I think secondly, I quite like change. I quite like the challenge of, why are we doing that? Or should we not maybe look at things differently? And I think the data center industry is unique in the construction industry, because it doesn't just allow you to do that. You have to do that in the data center industry, because if you just keep building your data centers the way you did, 10 years ago, then as a data center operator, you're probably gonna slowly but surely go out of business. And I think that's one of the main issues in the construction industry, that it's very slow, responds very slowly to change. And the data center industry responds very quickly to change. Now, obviously, that brings stress with it. It's a high pressure environment. I think a lot of construction jobs are, but I think at the same time it's quite exciting. So that's probably the things that excite me about data centers and data center industry, and that's how I would try and sell it to someone who's thinking about moving.
I think everyone in the DC space just talks about the people, and actually how great everyone working in the space is, in terms of the communities and all of those initiatives that are going on there to try and bring new people into the sector, and actually just bring everyone together. I think the communities there, that engagement, that everyone is just really engaged. And I'm not saying in other aspects of the built environment people aren't necessarily, but I think you really feel it actually in the data center space. So many great initiatives out there, and communities and events and all of that sort of stuff. And as you say, everyone wants to kind of include everybody, which is great. So I think that's really inspirational. Then you match that, as you're saying, with the kind of the innovation and everything that's involved in that, in terms of kind of trying to create the right spaces to support the evolution of the sector is amazing. Those two things you mentioned there, I think is exciting.
And I think one of the drivers, or one of the reasons behind that, is because a lot of people have moved into the data center industry relatively recently. So they went through that journey of maybe not knowing so much about the industry and someone being there who includes them. And I think if you've gone through an experience, it's much easier to relate that experience back to someone else, right? And I think that's probably one of the key things, that there's a lot of transitions that have happened with people that people have gone through, and that they would want to help other people transition as well.
Yeah, I think and that comes back to the mentoring and that kind of future-proofing the talent pool. Franzi, we have absolutely loved this discussion. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting. I was also completely blown away by the fact that you almost had to relearn German in a different way when going back to your
Me too.
native roots. So that's amazing. But you never think of things like that, and
No.
so that's been really, really brilliant to share. Thank you so much for your time and your insights, and for being part of our mentoring process. That's selfishly, that's been really, really valuable to our community. So thank you for all of your efforts.
Thank you, Franzi. That's brilliant.
Thanks for having me on, guys.